والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وملجأنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته الأكرمين. دوش بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا حبيب الله. Hazrat Qibla Mufti Sahib Muhammad Ikrami, dear respected Buzurgo, Bhaiyo, Dosto, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And our dear sisters, my bhaiyan widows, sun rahi hain, hazir hain, inshallah, aapko bhi salam. Today, inshallah, we're going to talk about a very important topic. And this is a topic which we often neglect in spite of its importance. And this is the topic in relation to hifzul lisan. Hifzul lisan. In other words, protection of the tongue. And often, many people haven't even heard of this concept in it being part of Islam. And yet, it is a very, very significant concept and a situation that Muslims need to be really aware of in terms of its implications. Just for us to really appreciate as a little bit of a preamble, it was asked to a famous Hakim, a wise man, and the question was, what is the most dangerous way? And what is the most dangerous? यानी कि किसी से पूछा गया कि सबसे खतरनाक रास्ता क्या है? तो उसने फरमाया कि कसरतुल ताआम व कसरतुल कलाम. कसरतुल ताआम व कसरतुल कलाम. कि बहुत ज्यादा खाना और बहुत ज्यादा बोलना, यानी कि सबसे खतरनाक रास्ता है. फिर इसी बंदे से पूछा गया कि सबसे which is the safest way, सबसे सलामती का रास्ता कौन सा है? तो उसने कहा कि किल्लतुल ताआम व किल्लतुल कलाम. किल्लतुल ताआम व किल्लतुल कलाम, कि कम खाना और कम बोलना. It's the safest way. And if you look at it, you know, eating moderately is good for our health, safety for our health. And killatul kalam, speaking not abundantly, you know, speaking when you need to speak, is a sure way of our safety, of our dignity, and the dignity of so many others, you see. And so, and all of these has connection to our tongue. इसका ताल्लुक हमारी ज़बान से है, यानी इस हिकमत का ताल्लुक हमारी ज़बान से है. हम ज़बान से, जायका पेट में नहीं होता, जायका खाने का ज़बान में होता है. तलज़्ज़ुज़ जब हम खाते हैं तो तलज़्ज़ुज़ ज़बान को होता है, पेट में तो फिर चला गया, उससे एक you have a satiation, but the actual taste is in the tongue. And every single word that's uttered occurs through only the tongue. And so the tongue has massive implication in our life. Massive implication in our life. And this is why they did a research in terms of how many words does an average human being speak a year. How many words an average human speaks a year is nearly 11 million words. 11 million words. 30,000 words every day. And this amounts to 10,900,000. Nearly 11 million words we utter. That's how significant it is. And you would think that something that occurs so regularly, that we should pay heed to that. We should think about it. And yet, as a community, we don't reflect on that. But Allah and the Messenger, it is very important, you see. So we have this concept called hukam shari, the ahkam of sharia, the laws, the ethics, and the morals of the way of sharia. And we often think the ahkam of sharia only in relation to what? Tahara, right? How to read salah, maybe nikah and talaq, okay? And we even know the ahkam al-mayyit, okay? But we often completely forget that there are other ahkam, other rules and regulations in our life. So every single aspect of our life has a hukum shari. And in the same way, there are ahkam lil lisan. There is a hukum shari in relation to our tongue. यानी ये जो ये हुक्म शरई है ना, ये दीन की जो फराइज और नवाही, ये सिर्फ क्या कहते हैं, हमने अपना महदूद इसका नजरिया ले लिया है. हालांकि यही these same ahkam apply in relation to our tongue as well. So just to demonstrate, remember this is a gathering of ta'lim and ta'allum, just to demonstrate the appreciation of the ahkam in relation, which only are in relation to the tongue. I'll mention some of them from the books of hadith and from the books of fiqh. So for example, you have this. He said, Babu tahrim al-ghiba wal-amri bil-hifz al-lisan. Babu tahrim al-ghiba. You know, this is the chapter on the prohibition of ghiba. What do we do ghiba with? Our tongue. Okay. Babu tahrimi sama' al-ghiba. Babu tahrim al-namima. Babu nahyi an-naql al-hadithi wa kalam al-nasi. باب تحريم الكذب باب بيان ما يجوز من الكذب باب الحث على التثبت فيما يقوله باب بيان غلط تحريم شهادة الزور باب تحريم اللعن إنسان بعينه أو دابته. This is the chapter on the prohibition of cursing other people and even cursing objects. What do we curse with? We curse with our tongue. باب تحريم سب المسلم بغير حق. The chapter on prohibition of swearing to another Muslim without right. Babu tahrimi sabbil amwati. Babu nahyi anil izai. This is a chapter on the prohibition of causing grief. Babu nahyi anil tajassusi. Right? And it carries on and on. You see. And so, for example, we have so many chapters, but bayanu ghilati tahrimi shahadati zuri, babu tahrimi, and so on and so forth. You see, and all of these ahkam are in relation to what? They're all in relation to our tongue, you see. And so we have to really appreciate that this tongue has big impact. This tongue has big impact, and it's particularly important for human beings, because our very definition is hayawanun natiq. Our definition is the speaking animal, right? This is how the classical ulama defined human being, hayawanun natiq. This is a person who constantly is speaking, you see. And so we have to really appreciate that speaking has big impact with our tongue, you see. And it's with our tongue that we can do the greatest of things. And it is with our tongue that we can do the worst of things. It is with our tongue with the same tongue we can do zikrullah. With the same tongue we can bring people together. With the same tongue we do salawat on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With the same tongue we do amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. And with this same tongue we do ghiba. With the same tongue we cause grief to other people. With this tongue we divide other people, we separate people with our tongue, you see. And so this is why there are many ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioning and emphasizing the significance of our tongue in relation to how we handle it. You see, this is why in one hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man yadman li ma bayna lahyayhi wa ma rijlayhi adman lahu al-jannah." He said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if someone could give me a surer guarantee in relation to what is between his cheeks, meaning his tongue, and what is between his feet, meaning his private parts, adman lahul jannah. I give him the guarantee of Jannah. I give him the guarantee of Jannah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is confident about a person who's disciplined with his tongue, that he will have Jannah, you see. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He said, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا يَرْفَعُهُ بِهَا دَرَجَاتٍ. That there is a person, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ. There is a person who speaks with a kalima, who speaks a word. مِنْ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ. वो बंदा एक कलिमा बोलता है, एक बोल बोलता है. مِنْ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ, कि अल्लाह की खुशनुदी में. He speaks a goodly word. لا يلقي لها بالا. And he doesn't think big of it. He doesn't think, I'm doing an amazing speech. Okay? يرفعه بها درجات. Allah elevates him in ranks. These are ranks in paradise. And while on the other hand, وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ. On the other hand, there is a person who speaks a word مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ, in the displeasure of Allah. Meaning, he says something which is contrary to ethics, which is a lie, which is a fabrication, which is something that attracts Allah's displeasure. لا يلقي لها بالا. He does not even think it's a big deal. يهوي بها في جهنم. And through that, he is thrown into the fire. Through that, he is thrown into the fire. He says something, he doesn't think it's a big deal. He just utters it carelessly, without any thought and regard. And because of it, Allah throws him in Jahannam. And in another hadith, another riwayah, أَبْعَدْ مَا بَيْنَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. That you know, to the point that this is an exaggeration in relation to the depths of hell. That a person is thrown in the depths of hell because he said something carelessly. So words have big impact. Words have tremendous impact. Words have tremendous impact to the point that we are either elevated through our words or we are relegated profoundly just through our words. You see. This is why in another hadith, a man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, "Man najah? What is najah?" You know, these Sahaba were really interesting. The kind of questions the Sahaba asked. Often we are asked question: does my wuzu get accepted, or my namaz? Can I wear this and can I not do this? Right? The Sahaba were interested in big concepts. The Sahaba were interested in genuine, universal wisdoms, which enabled them for elevation. And so this Sahabi, he asked the question is, وَمَن najah, and what is salvation? In other words, how do I become a truly successful human being? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ لِسَانَكَ, control your tongue. وَلْيَسَعْ بَيْتُكَ, and make your house be a place that you can stay in. وَبْكِي عَلَى خَطِيئَتِكَ, and cry upon your mistakes. The number one, so if you want to attain salvation, you see the Sahaba have done the work for us. They've asked us very important questions. They've asked this question for us. And through them, we know the path of Najah because they asked about these things. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam here is saying three things which enable us to attain salvation. The first thing is, أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ لِسَانَكَ. So if you want salvation, we have to control our tongue. Meaning that we have to guard our tongue. We have to be careful what we say. And number two, وَلْيَسَعْ بَيْتُكَ, and meaning that stay indoors unless it's necessary. Meaning that frivolous going out and being away from your safe zone, from the green zone, is tantamount to danger, you see. And especially in this end of time, where there's so much fitna outside, where there's so much tribulation, so many delusions and so many temptations. The moment we step outside of our house, we are prone to the predation of the shayateen, you see. So staying in the house as much as we can, making our house a comfortable abode of rest and dhikr and meditation, is the advice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَابْكِ عَلَى خَطِيئَتِكَ, and cry upon your mistakes. You know, so wabki, this is the path to salvation. Wabki ala. You know, often when we do something wrong, we don't think it's a big deal. And if we're lucky, we'll go and say, Astaghfirullah, Allah forgive me. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying is, this is not enough. If you want salvation, wabki ala khati'atik. Cry at your mistakes. Cry at your mistakes. We're often so concerned about other people's mistakes. हमारा अमूमन एक तवज्जो है कि दूसरे लोगों की गलती, फलां ने ये कर दिया, फलां ने वो कर दिया, हैं? तो हमारी तवज्जो बिल्कुल दूसरों पे, हालांकि हुजूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम इरशाद फरमाते हैं वबकी अला खती, अपनी गलतियों पर रो, यानी अपनी गलतियों, सिर्फ महज ये कर अस्तगफिरुल्लाह, ये कहना कि मेरा काम हो गया, बख्श गया हूं या मेरी मग़फ़िरत हो गई, नहीं, हुजूर फरमाते हैं वबकी अला खतीयातिक, अपनी ये जो गुनाह करते हैं, जो गलतियां करते हैं, इन पर रो. And in another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you can't cry, pretend to cry. अगर यानी कि आंसू तब ना आए तो एक, we make a pretense of crying because we want salvation, you see. So we don't take lightly the wrong things we do, you see. And so what we say has tremendous impact in relation to our everyday life, you see. And so this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in relation to the significance of speech, this is ma'mur bihi, this is Allah's command. So just like Allah commands salah, He also commands the saying of good things. This is why the verse in the Quran is وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا اللَّهَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a pact with the Bani Israel, with the previous prophetic community. And the first aspect of the pact is that they do not worship anyone other than Allah. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And be kind and benevolent to your parents. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى. And with your relatives. وَالْيَتَامَى. And with the orphans, with the people who are destitute. وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. And to say good things to people. So this is hukum shari. So just like we are obliged to worship Allah, just like we are obliged to fulfill the rights of parents and our relatives, in the same way, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ, and say good things to people, say goodly things to people. So this is hukum shari. So we need to ask questions about how to say good things to people. And on the other hand, what does Allah say about saying bad things? لا يحب الله الجهر بالقول السوء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like you to say loud قول السوء. This evil speech, hate speech that causes grief to people, speech that causes animosity between people. لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like that. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says لا يحب, it means He hates that. He loathes people saying bad things to each other, you see. And so if you look at the characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba say, is that he was tawil sumt, meaning he used to stay quiet for long periods of time. Meaning the sunnah, one of the sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we often talk about sunnah being the beard, we are the imam, the blessed imamah tree. We do all these various sunnahs, right? And we do not realize that there are other sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we also need to take into account. And one of them is tawil sumt, meaning that he used to remain quiet for long periods of time. When he spoke beauty and grace, you see. And da'im al-fikra, meaning that he was constantly reflecting, constantly meditating, constantly contemplating. This was the characteristic of our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if we want to emulate Rasulullah, we have to take into account these characteristics too, you see. And then there was some Sahaba, ridwanullahi alayhim, who used to so practice safeguarding their tongue that Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu used to place a stone in his mouth. So someone asked Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, why do you place the stone in your mouth? Why do you place the stone in your mouth? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that in order to safeguard myself, from speaking previously and from causing grief to other people. This is the extent to which the Sahaba went in relation to safeguarding themselves from the harms of their tongues, you see. And yet we are completely careless. We utter these days without any regard. And so we have to develop a practical approach at hifzul lisan. We have to develop a practical approach in terms of protecting our tongue from speaking which is inappropriate, you see. And I will offer now certain methodologies which will help us to appreciate the significance of our speech and to develop goodly speech. So number one, whenever we speak, number one, and you see here, speaking is not just the tongue here, meaning any type of communication. Any type of communication. And this includes writing, this includes writing emails, this includes typing, this includes any type of speech, you see. Because really, in many ways, the hand becomes a substitute for the tongue when it writes. So the reality is what we write with our hand is in the same hukum of the lisan, it's in the same hukum of the tongue. So the first thing we do before communicating with anyone, before we say something or write something, or before we indicate something to anyone, number one advice is we have to really reflect. Think before you say. Think before you write. Think and reflect. And what does this mean? It means that we think about the consequences of what we're about to say. We think about the implication of what we're about to say. We think about how the other person may feel. Right? So for example, no one likes to be offended. No one likes to be cornered. No one likes to be intimidated. And yet, so we have to realize that if we do not like these things, if we don't like people to swear at us, if we don't like people to condemn us, if we don't like people to undermine us, if we do not like character assassination for ourselves, then we should not do that to other people. So we should think about the implication of what we're about to write. We should think about the implication of what we're about to say. This is why they say that they say tolo pir bolo, meaning that you need to weigh. You need to weigh what you're about to say. And there were certain people amongst the Salaf who, when they used to speak each sentence, they used to pause. They used to pause, and then they used to utter the other sentence. Then they used to pause, and then they used to utter the sentence. And so someone asked them, why do you pause for a long period after each sentence? And he said that so that I can really calculate the impact of this on Yawmul Qiyamah. The impact of what I'm about to say, I can calculate the impact of this in relation to Yawmul Qiyamah. So meaning that, generally speaking, we need to be reflective. So we don't just utter something without any regard, without any sense of courtesy, without any sense of decorum. So we need to really reflect. So we don't just utter spontaneously, we utter with thought. We deliberate before we utter something. And this is especially in relation to serious matters. So in relation to job matters, in relation to relationship issues, be very careful about what you're about to write. Often the advice is, if you are about to send an email, make it practical as possible. When we're about to send an email, rather than to send the email straight away, wait maybe a couple of hours. Maybe write the email, put it in your drafts, and then send it when you're confident. Maybe you slept over it. Maybe you thought about it. And this is particularly in relation to serious matters. If we look at most of the ikhtilaf, most of our disagreements, most of our fights and quarrels that we have are usually because of the words we utter, or usually because of the things we say to each other. Right? Most of the situations that lead to animosity and hatred and rivalry and animosity, right, entirely caused by what we say, you see. And so in order to really end this friction, the first thing we can do in relation to preserving our tongue and therefore our dignity and therefore our salvation and therefore our paradise and therefore being protected from Jahannam, right, is to really reflect before you say something, especially in serious matters. Often in relation to unserious issues, we're somewhat careless and there's no expectation, so we just carry on being no. But in relation to something which is serious, really think about the impact of what you're about to say or write. Okay. Number two, the Muslim is expected consciously to refrain from any type of injurious speech, any type of hate speech. So even if we feel aggrieved and angry at the wrong of another, we are not permitted to reciprocate with injurious speech. So we can say that what you have said or what you have done to me is wrong, it's highly inappropriate, I'm just letting you know that this is not right, and I will take action appropriately, right? Rather than to immediately, knee-jerk reaction, swear at them, condemn them, call them all sorts of evil names. This is haram in Islam. This is haram even in relation to retaliation. Even in relation to retaliation. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Al-Muslimu man salima an-nasa min lisanihi wa yadihi. The Muslim is the one who people are protected from his tongue and from his heart. So number two, make an extra conscious effort to make sure that you do not say anything which might injure other people, which might offend other people, which might cause so much grief to other people. And remember, we often will say this type of speech in relation to some kind of retaliation. There's ikhtilaf between two people, what happens? People start swearing at each other. People start causing division. But we have these in our families, right? We have these in our relatives, between husband and wife, right? You know, and so what often happens is what? We're causing each other so much offense in our communities. So number two, be on our extra guard to make sure that we do not say anything which is injurious to another person. Okay? Number two, say goodly things. Number three, say goodly things. Meaning, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. So when you do speak to people, say beautiful things. Say kind things, you see. So for example, say words which will make peace between people. Say words which make peace between people. We often say words to each other which make people fight, really, in our community. But the prophetic advice is say words which will bring people together, you see, which will give people peace, right? And we have this in our family situation. Often the situation is, if the daughter goes to her mother, she often talks ill of her husband. She often talks ill of her husband, right? So out of the 100%, he's doing 80% good, and the 20% maybe not good. And what she presents to her mom and her family and relatives is 20% negative reflection on her husband. She says that. And then what happens? The family do not see the family, relatives, they don't really see the 100% of the picture. So they only rely on their daughter's testimony. And if their daughter is giving 20%, right, of the reflection of the marriage, then they have a fake account. They have a fake account of the reality of the situation. And then what happens? The family goes against the husband, right? And equally in the same way, the son, when he goes to his mother and his family, right, what does he do? He usually, what happens? He says the 20% negativity to his mother and father. And then the family go against the wife, you see. And so really this is advice. If we want our marriages to be safe and good and wholesome, then be careful what you say to your mom and dad, both husband and wife. Be careful how you present your husband. Be careful how you present your wife to your family. Because your family will almost entirely depend on your reflection. And if you give a fake reflection, you will cause them to hate the husband, or you will cause them to hate the wife. So when we present situations about other people, be just and at least fair about the situation. Because rather than to cause wars between two families, right? It's better to make peace between two families, you see. And so you say good things to people. You say things which might support other people. So for example, when someone is going through distress and hardship, what do? You offer beautiful advice. You say, don't worry, don't give up. You're doing amazing things, you see. And the other thing is, making people at ease. Making people at ease is from the goodness of what we say, you see. Like in one hadith, إِنَّ أَحَبَّ الْأَعْمَالِ بَعْدَ الْفَرَائِضِ إِدْخَالَ سُرُورِ قَلْبِ مُؤْمِنٍ. That one of the most beautiful deeds after the fara'id is placing joy and serenity in the heart of a believer. And so we can say good things to make people cheer up, you see. And often the advice is that if you are having ikhtilaf with someone, say 5 beautiful things about them. Meaning that if you have a relationship issue with anyone, on a daily basis, they say for 21 days, say 5 good things to the person. How many? Just like we read the 5 maktubat, the 5 salah, say 5 good things to the person. And so they say within 21 days, your relationship will improve tremendously. Just by saying 5 good things to a person. And so this is the power and impact of saying good things, you see. When we say, we offer wisdom. When we say we offer wisdom, you see. When we say we do zikr of Allah. And so there are numerous things we can do with our tongue that create so much goodness in our society, you see. And the final advice I will give in relation to the tongue is that the most worthy, you see, we often think the people we need to jail are those people who are committing crime, isn't it? So those people who commit crime, we imprison them. And what I say is the most worthy of imprisonment is our tongue. We need to put our tongue in jail. We need to put, हम पर लाजिम है कि हम अपनी ज़बान को जेल में डालें, अपनी ज़बान को जेल में डालें. अब ये नहीं कि आप जेल आप ढूंढे के बर्मिंघम प्रिजन है तो अपनी ज़बान को उधर रख दें 50 साल के. नहीं, ज़बान का जेल क्या है? ज़बान का जेल मुंह है. ज़बान का जेल मुंह है. Our teeth are its bars. Our teeth are its bars and our mouth is the cell. We need to imprison our tongue. And just like prisoners, जब जो कैदी हैं उनको रिहाई कब मिलती है? कैदियों को रिहाई कब मिलती है? कैदियों को रिहाई तब मिलती है जब वो अच्छे बंदे बने. अगर बुरे बनते रहे तो उनको कैद में ही रखा जाता है. So when we release captives, prisoners, we only release them because of good behavior. So in other words, only release your tongue for good things to say. If the tongue is going to say evil things, then we need to imprison our tongue. And this is the best advice I can give to myself, I can give to everyone. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon us. We ask Allah to protect us. Allahumma ij'al alsinatana natiqan bil haqqi والذكر والتسبيح والحمد والتهليل والشكر والشفقة. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our tongue a means of zikr of Allah. We ask Allah ta'ala to make our tongue a means of glorification of Allah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our tongue a means of saying praise to Allah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our tongue a means of making peace and bringing joy to people. We ask Allah to make our tongue a means of bringing goodness to society, a means of offering wisdom and nahi anil munkar. We ask Allah special protection for our tongue in it being a tongue which is full of spite and hatred and swears and blasphemy and all these evils. Allahumma salli ala community sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam salaman tasliman kathiran tayyiban mubarakan.